First of all, I would like to pay my respect to our venerable. Good evening, teacher and everyone. I am from Group 6 and our team consists of me, Maistre Ravadi, Hinchanararat, Sangpik Ratana, Van Lipe and Trinita. Our topic of presentation for today is the story of the rain came. We will start with our content. There are 5 main parts for today's presentation. Background of the story, introduction to the story, the use of literary elements, reflection, conclusion. Now moving on to the background of the story. The Rain Came is a short story that was written in 1961 by an African writer, Grace Onward. Besides being a famous author, she was also a nurse, a journalist, a politician, and a diplomat. She was born on the 15th of May 1930 in Mutare, Central Nyanza region in Kenya, and she died on 18 March 2015. Moreover, she was the first female from Kenya to publish books in English. Her famous stories are A Year of Sacrifice, The Promised Land, and The Rain Came. The setting of the story. The Rain Came took place in Luo village in Kenya during a drought. Now let's move on to the introduction, the brief summary of the story. For a long time there was no rain in the Luo village. Villagers have nothing to eat and the cattle are dying. One day the chief of the village, Lebongo, went to visit the Nditi, the medicine man. Nditi told the chief about his dream that in order to have rainfalls, the chief must sacrifice his only daughter named Oganda. After coming back, Lebongo was really devastated. The chief started gathering everyone except Oganda. Lebongo told everyone what happened to everyone, but instead of being sad, they sang and danced happily. As for Oganda, she thought people were having a meeting about her marriage. There were a couple of men from other villages that she thought of, but only man she wanted to marry was Oshinda. Not long, villagers were dancing in front of her grandma's hut. Oganda knew that it was not about her marriage, but her death. In the afternoon, the whole village said goodbye to her and sang a song to accompany her on the way. On the next day, she crossed the barrier to enter the sacred land. She must be at the lake before the sunset. As she ran, she felt something chasing her, and it was Oshinda. Oshinda came and saved her. Oshinda asked Oganda to run away with him. The sun went down and they reached the barrier. At last the rain came. Next part is the conflict and solution of the story. The main conflict of the story is that Oganda, the daughter of the chief, has to be sacrificed in order to save the village from the drought. As for Shinda, she was not happy. She never wanted to die. She think that she was still young. She wanted to have a family and get married with her Oshinda. As for the solution, she was ready to get herself killed. She had been walking for days while disappointed with her family and her village. She has almost reached the lake, but she was saved by her lover, Osinda. As a result, They had both run away. Even though Uganda was never been sacrificed, the rain still came. That's the end of my part. Hinchanaradat will be responsible for the next part. Thank you.
Thank you, Ravadi, for the wonderful explanation in the introduction part. Once again, good evening, lecturer and fellow classmates who are presented in class this evening. My name is Hinchanaradat, and I'll be responsible for the explanation of the plot diagram, the themes of the story, and the characterization. So without further ado, let's get started with it. So the first thing I'm going to do is explain about the plot diagram of the story. And as we all know, the plot diagram consists of 5 main components, including the exposition, first and foremost, then the rising action, the climax, the falling action, and last but not least, the resolution. So the plot diagram can be applied into any story from any films or any books because the plot diagram itself is integral to the story. Let's get into the first component of the plot diagram, which is the exposition. So the exposition is the part where the author would expose to us about the settings and the characters of the story. Sometimes the author might also introduce to us about the problems that the story is facing or is going to face throughout the whole storyline. And as for our story, The Rain Came, it is no different. In the beginning of the story, we are introduced to Labongo, who is the chief and the leader of the Luo people, and we are also introduced to some other minor characters in the story as well. On top of introducing the characters to us, the author also like exposed to us about the settings of the story. So for the settings, I wanted to add a bit more about the tradition and culture of the Luo people on top of the explanation that my teammate had given previously. So we know that the story took place in the Luo village during the time of drought, and that drought is also going to be our main problem throughout the whole story. So let's talk about indigenous people. So indigenous people are people who live in tribal community deep in the forest, far away from civilization. So the general idea about indigenous people is that they strongly believe in gods or some kind of in monsters or some kind of spirit and abstract spirit or something. So whenever there's some kind of natural phenomenon happening, even if it's a good thing or bad thing, even if it's good or bad, indigenous people tend to interpret that natural phenomenon as a bad thing. And sometimes they might also interpret it as some kind of God's wrath on them. So in order to kind of rid of that phenomenon, they would go pray and beg their god or the spirits for mercy. In some cases, they might even go the extra mile of offering sacrifices of human beings, offer sacrifices of living creatures that can sometimes be living animals or even living human beings. And as for our story, the Luo people are no different from the majority, or if not all of the indigenous people. So let's move on to the rising action. So the rising action happens in order to help build and liften the suspense towards the climax of the story. And in this case, I believe that there are 4 actions contributing to the rising action. So the first one is when the news was broken to the chief that his daughter was going to be sacrificed. The second one is when the chief broke that same news to the villagers. And the third one is when Uganda knew that she was going to be sacrificed. And as for the last rising action, I believe it happened towards the end of the story itself. So it happens when Uganda has already reached the sacrificial site. So after having reached to that site, she kind of felt like there was something following her, because she had heard some kind of branch cracking, footsteps, or some faint breathing or something, and she had perceived that the mysterious thing that was following her was the lake monster that was trying to eat her alive. But instead, that the monstrosity that she had imagined turned out to be her savior. And that is it for the rising action. Let's move on to the climax. So the climax is where the story is at its peak, as you can see in this diagram. So the climax happened when Osinda saved Uganda. And moving on to the falling action. So this happens when Uganda refused to escape with Osinda. But upon some persuasion from Osinda, finally Uganda gave in to that offer and finally escaped with Osinda. And now moving on to the last part of the plot diagram, which is the resolution. So for the story, in the end, for the story, it has a happy ending, because the ending was good for both our protagonists, Uganda, and for the villagers as well. So first off, for Uganda, the best thing that had happened to her was that she didn't die. And the second thing was that she was able to escape and live in a faraway unknown land, live a new life with her lover Osinda. And as for the villagers, the problem of the drought had already been solved because the rain came, but they didn't know that if anyone was sacrificed or not, because they would just assume Uganda was sacrificed, that was what made the rain come. And now moving on to another part, which is the themes of the story. So for the story, I believe that there are three main themes embedded in it. And the first one is delusional beliefs. So all the villagers believed that there was only one solution in order to solve the drought, and that was to sacrifice a person. And apart from trying to find kind of like other and optional solution to the problem, or even try the problem or the root cause of the problem, or maybe try to find like some precaution to alleviate themselves from the harm of the drought, they would only set their mindset on using that one solution that has been passed on from their ancestors one to another. So another theme would be man versus man. So this theme is mostly directed to the chief himself. So after hearing the news that his daughter was going to be sacrificed, the chief has to make a decision. But I believe what baffled him would be that should he make that decision in a role of a father or in a role of a leader. So let's say if he had made the choice in a role of a father, that would mean his daughter is not going to be sacrificed, but on the other hand, he might endanger his whole tribe and put kind of like there's a possible chance that he might kill them because if there are no sacrifice, then the rain wouldn't come. Instead, if he had made the decision in a role of a leader, that would mean that would surely benefit his villagers, as the problem of the drought will be solved, but it comes at a cost, and that cost is that there's going to be a hole in his heart, because his one and only beloved daughter will be sacrificed. Um, so another theme in the story is about selfishness. So after knowing that Oganda was to be sacrificed, the villagers, meaning those around her, weren't even a bit sympathetic of her whatsoever. Instead, they enjoyed themselves by singing and dancing, like enjoying them singing and dancing in ecstasy, as they know that they'll be saved from the drought. So here's a quote from Oganda after seeing the villagers enjoying themselves, even after knowing that she was going to be sacrificed. So she said that all these years she had been with her people. She thought she understood them, but now she discovered she was just a stranger to them. So basically, this just boils down to the meaning of to the meaning that generally people are selfish and they would think about their well-being first and foremost, rather than caring about other people. And so the next part is about characterization. So for this part, I've taken 3 characters to present. So the first one is Uganda. So Uganda is our main character and the protagonist in the story. Uganda is the only girl amongst the other 20 children of Labongo, and she is also his favorite child. Uganda is a young, beautiful, charming girl. Moreover, her unique trait was that she was unselfish. Even after knowing she was to be sacrificed, she accepted this fact. To be honest, at first she was a bit saddened by this news, as she won't be able to experience womanhood like all the other girls her age, but in the end, she went through with it. On top of that, towards the end, even after having the chance to escape with Lucinda, Uganda still contemplated about the escape, because she felt that she might bring harm to the villagers, as the problem of drought might not be solved. And another problem is that she felt that her ancestors would curse her and linger with her throughout the entirety of her life with bad luck. So another character is Labongo, or the chief. So Labongo is Uganda's father, as well as the chief of the Luo people. So it is said in the story that the chief or the leader of the Luo people is deemed to be the bravest of the braves. So in this case, we can infer that Labongo is considered to be the bravest of the braves in order to lead the Luo tribe. On top of that, Labongo is also a loving father and husband. But that is not all. He is also an admirable and selfless leader of his people as well. And moving on to another character, who is Lucinda. So Lucinda is a minor character that only appeared near the end of the story. However, he is an important character. His appearance affected the plot as a whole and had a huge impact at the end. As it was said by Uganda, Lucinda is a brave and daring man, and this can be actually seen through his action in the story, because Lucinda went through the sacred ground which no one has ever returned in order to save his lover Uganda. Additionally, Lucinda is also the first one who dared to reject the tradition and make changes. So this is the moment where Lucinda persuaded Uganda to escape with him, to live in a faraway unknown land, to live a new life, meaning he would reject his tradition and make changes to his life. And that is it for my part. For the next part, Rothanet will be presenting. Thank you.
So I will be doing the quote interpretation, irony, metaphors, and symbolism. So the first quote is, they had been like three cooking stones sharing their burdens. Three cooking stone is about the family ties between parents and doctors, and it is about Ugandas and the parents. We cannot take one cooking stone from the group because the other two cannot hold the pot, so it will collapse. The three people sharing their burdens are about love and care. For example, Labon's cry after hearing the news that his only daughter will be sacrificed for the leg monster, and her mother fainted after hearing the news. Moving on to the next quote, she felt like a flower nipped at the bud, never to enjoy the morning dew again. Um, if the flower has been cut off, it will never get to bloom. And as for Uganda, this simply means that she will never grow up and become an adult like other people. She will never get to enjoy her life, making a family, since she is about to die and never be with her lovers. It's gone, Uganda wept, hiding her face in her hand. It's gone. It demonstrates all the incident that she had been through, and it's all gone. In addition, she cries because she feared that she has done something wrong that might be against the traditions, and she will get everyone in trouble. Next, we have dramatic irony. Tell me, is it my marriage you were discussing? Um, Oganda thinks that her parents are discussing about her marriage. However, we all know that they were discussing about her death. She is being sacrificed to the leg monster. Next, verbal irony. You can take it from me that I won't marry any of them. Actually, it is not that Oganda does not want to get married. However, she wants to get married to Osindas because out of the men in her village, she fancy Osinda. And here we have situational irony. The creature caught up with Oganda. A strong hand grabbed her, but she fell onto the sand and fainted. Everyone expected that Oganda will die because of the leg monster. Nevertheless, it is Osinda that grabbed her hand because he wanted to help her to escape. Moving on, we've got symbolisms. The leg monster represents death. The leg monster is a symbol of death. In the story, it is portray about customs and traditional belief that force Ugandans to face death in order for her people to have rain. So Uganda will be sacrificed to show the drought that her people are facing. Sunset represents hopelessness. In the story, it was mentioned that she looked at her weeping mother and whispered, "Whenever you want to see me, always look at the sunset, I'll be there." Uganda intended to send a message that she was hopeless in the company of people she thought she knew well, but who turned out to be strangers to her. She did not have much hope because she was about to be sacrificed for the sake of others. The last one is Uganda brass chain. Um, the brass chain here is a symbol of love. Uganda wore the brass chains around her waist that was given by Osinda, and it represents the love between her and Osinda throughout the years. Moving on to metaphor. For a long time, the three souls who love one another dearly sat in the darkness. The three souls are being compared to Uganda's and her parents. Darkness is represent fear. The three of them love each other very much. However, the happiness is not lasting forever as Uganda's is about to die and her parents are very sad upon hearing the news that Uganda is chosen to be the one who will be sacrificed for the Lex monster, and the only fear they had is losing their daughters. So this is the end of my part, and Lee Pierce will be presenting the next part. Thank you.
Now let's move to the last part of the presentation, which is about reflection. I have two main points that I'm going to talk about. The first one is about difficulties in reading this text, and the other one is useful idea that can be drawn from the text. So about the difficulty, there was some vocabulary that I needed to focus on while I was reading. As far as I've read the story, I noticed that the rain camp is likely to use many difficult words or the word that I barely see in any books. For me, it is a bit hard to catch up with the whole story because each sentence that the writer uses is connected with one another. Plus, if I don't know the meaning of those words, I will truly get confused with it, or I think it might become an interesting story. For the solution to overcome this reading, I suggest all of you to take dictionary and you can try to research more synonym from any other book, Google, or any website that can help you to understand the story well. I believe that this story will give you a lot of advice and will not disappoint it. Now I would like to look at the next part. The first hidden mistake of the rain camp is people in the society only think about themselves. From my point of view, the rain camp story has shown a negative idea which is about letting a person die is better than letting the whole villagers die. On this point, the daughter of Labongo had to sacrifice her life to help her villager. It was also a duty for her father to risk his only daughter's life on something unacceptable like this. He might be called a bad father, but for his people, he was a hero, a savior, or one of the bravest men that people respect. After people in the village knew about this problem, they didn't have anything or found another solution to help, but they decided to have a party, or their opinion was like they finally escaped from their own death by letting others sacrifice for them. Generally, they think that it's only just the responsibility of a leader that he must do it, even if it cost everything in Labongo's life. As a result, this kind of people who avoid responsibility and bring others down just to live peacefully only by themselves as a loss to society. And for the next hidden mistake is people believe in accent. Personally, having culture, religion, and rule for each country is a great idea to organize people, but sometimes it will become an obsession that causes bad consequences. As I can see from this text, the people in the village choose to follow their accent of God when this culture take Labongo doctor life in order to save the villager from trial. This is very unfair for Labongo families. It is not a great honor to be selected by the Spirit to die so that the society might live and people will remember you, because this kind of perspective will continue from generation to generation. According to the story, when Okanda ran away from that place, the rain still came. This proves that the people in the village don't have my education to view the reality more than their own culture. That could be something related to climate change. If if society if society want to change something, I think they should care more about how to respect each other, so kindness, be selfless, and provide an education system instead of believing in action term. Um, for the last, hidden mistake is a good example of a true leader. Talking about a true leader who put his people rather than his life or his family first is what Labong did. And he just couldn't disobey the accenter because people would be dying soon. So he had to make a scary decision, even it was breaking his heart, just to let his daughter die as a ransom to save many lives. As a father, it's not something that most people can do, or stand still to let your beloved daughter die in front of your eye. However, as the chief of a village, and for the sake of the low people, he is going to do everything and let himself stay in a sorrow. Um, as a result, a leader like Labono is if one of a kind people that will not abandon his people no matter what, and so a good example of a true leader to everyone.
Okay. After hearing about useful things, let's have a look on value that can be gained from within this text. First point is kinship. Labong after knowing that his only daughter would be sacrificed for the tribe, he wed Pilari under the name of father. His wife, on the other hand, fainted after the chief announced the news, while others started dancing and singing. And at that moment, it is clearly shown that no one would appreciate you as deeply as your family does. And moving to the next point, I chose to present about loyalty. As we know that Lao Bang-o, he did hesitate whether to save his tribe or his own daughter, even though he had to make a critical decision. He still chose to sacrifice his only daughter due to the fact that he had once promised that he would lay down his life, if necessary, the life of his whole household, and to save the tribe. He was loyal to his people and the ancestors for not choosing his daughter's life over the life of the whole tribe. And moving to the next point is talking about love. I know without the help of a cinder, Okenda would have died because of true love. They both love each other so much. As for Okenda, she always thought of a cinder, and when she was left alone in her grandma's hut, she had dreamed about her marriage with a cinder. She once said that no layman could enter that holy place and come out alive. However, Osinda did come and save his loved one. Only those who truly love each other would do such things. So, that is the end of the value. Here comes the comparison to the real world. Let's start with deception. When the people act as if they love Okander in front of her, but then they talk behind her back, and she just realized that at the last moment. And not only in story, in this society it is not that much different. People would praise you, but deep down they might hate or jealous you. Not every individual loves you though they act nicely. And the last point is mindset. At this point, I would focus on women's mindset. Like they would choose to surrender over shutting out the problems. As we can see, Uganda couldn't accept the fact that she had to die at such a lovely age at first, but then she had convinced herself to sacrifice for her people rather than calling for their help. And as in reality, a woman is a daughter, a sister, a mother. She was taught to be gentle, think of others more than herself, and she had a hard time saying no to requests. For instance, in a family, a mother would sacrifice many things for her own family, even if she was tired. She would never tell others because she doesn't want to be someone burdens. And that is the end. So move to the conclusion. The Rain Came is a story that illustrates the culture of the people called Luo, and we can see that sacrificing for things is shown in many ways. At last, Okander were saved because of true love, and the rain came without sacrificing anyone. And for the lastly, blindly belief could cause a huge mess. Thank you, and that is the end of our presentation. If you have any question, feel free to ask.